It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Springfield, Missouri, the kind of day when kids play outside, neighbors feel safe, and everything seems normal. Haley was walking home, just a short walk like she always did. But this time, she never made it. Out of nowhere, a gold pickup truck pulled up. The man inside asked her for directions. Haley walked over, trusting, kind, just trying to help. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed her and sped off. No warning, no chance to run. And just like that, she was gone. People saw it happen. A neighbor got the license plate. Police moved fast. Hope was still alive. But by that evening, hope turned to horror. The truck led them to a man named Craig Michael Wood, a school aide, a coach, someone who had worked around children for years. No one expected him. When police searched his home, what they found was terrifying. The basement was full of bleach, and something worse, evidence of a terrible crime. They found hidden writings, disturbing videos, and most heartbreaking of all, Haley's body. Everything had happened so fast. Too fast. This wasn't just a missing child case. It was the shocking truth that a predator had been hiding in plain sight. Someone trusted. Someone who had fooled everyone. This is the story of Haley Owens. Welcome to the crime series. Before we begin, do us a quick favor. Drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. We want to know where you're tuning in from, because these stories matter everywhere. Like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Springfield, Missouri is a mid-sized city nestled in the heart of the Ozarks. It's the kind of place where life moves a little slower and where people take pride in knowing their neighbors. Families raise their children here with the comfort that they are safe. The streets are lined with modest homes, and the rhythm of daily life feels steady and familiar. Among those families was the Owens family, a hard-working, close-knit household. The parents, Stacy Barfield and Ryan Owens, lived with their two children, Marcus, the older brother, and his little sister, Haley Marie Owens. Their home stood on West Lombard Street. Haley was born on August 18, 2003. From the start, she brought light into every room. She was a bright, cheerful girl with a natural sweetness that made people smile. Haley had a warm laugh and a heart that seemed too big for her small frame. She was the kind of child who never hesitated to share her toys, help others, or offer a kind word. Growing up in a single-story house, Haley learned early about the value of family and community. Her bond with her brother Marcus, whom she affectionately called Owen, was especially strong. He looked out for her, and she adored him. The two shared inside jokes, long talks, and countless afternoons playing outside until the sun dipped behind the trees. By the time she reached 10 years old, Haley had already shown herself to be thoughtful, caring, and unusually mature for her age. Her mother, Stacy, often spoke about her daughter's gentle nature. She was always smiling, Stacy said, always laughing, always helping. Her hobbies reflected the kind of child she was, creative, curious, and content with simple joys. She loved to read books, filling her imagination with stories. She enjoyed drawing and coloring, often covering pages with hearts, animals, and little sketches of her family. Baking with her mother was one of her favorite pastimes, mixing batter, icing cupcakes, or just sitting at the table chatting while the oven warmed the kitchen. Outside, she was just as lively. Haley enjoyed riding her bike up and down the street, waving to neighbors, and stopping to chat with friends on the block. She loved the fresh air, the feel of the wind in her hair, and the freedom of childhood in a neighborhood that felt safe and familiar. In her neighborhood, Haley was a familiar and trusted presence. She was allowed to walk short distances by herself, like visiting a friend's house a block or two away. This was typical for children in the area and reflected the trust and familiarity shared among neighbors. Haley was responsible, cautious, and aware of her surroundings. She was known for being polite, well-behaved, and respectful both at home and in the community. At school, she was in the 4th grade at Westport Elementary School in Springfield. Teachers described her as bright, respectful, and attentive. She followed instructions, took her studies seriously, and always made an effort to help her classmates. She was the kind of child who didn't seek attention, but was always remembered for her warmth and kindness. She included others in group activities and was always willing to lend a helping hand. Her classmates enjoyed being around her, and teachers appreciated the positivity she brought into the classroom. She indeed made a lasting impression on both teachers and peers. Everything about Haley Owens reflected the innocence of a child with her whole life ahead of her. She was thriving in school, well-adjusted at home, and adored by her family and community. Her mother and father described her as helpful, cheerful, and filled with compassion. Her love for animals, her care for younger children, and her eagerness to be kind made her stand out. She was the kind of child who made people around her feel better just by being there. Before her name became known for a reason that would shake the entire community, Haley was simply a little girl with a big heart. A daughter, a sister, a student, and a friend. A child of Springfield, Missouri. February 18, 2014. It was a Tuesday in Springfield, Missouri, a peaceful afternoon in a quiet neighborhood where people felt safe. Children were playing, the sun was still out, and there was no warning that anything terrible was about to happen. For 10-year-old Haley Owens, it was just another regular day. School was over, and like many afternoons before, she had stopped by a friend's house for a quick visit. Walking home alone wasn't unusual. She knew the streets. Her house was just a few blocks away. Nothing about that day felt dangerous. But in less than a minute, everything changed. At around 4:48 p.m., as Haley walked along West Lombard Street, a gold Ford Ranger pickup truck pulled up beside her. It slowed down. The driver rolled down his window. He looked like any other middle-aged man, not someone to be afraid of. He called out to Haley, asking for directions. He smiled. He sounded polite. Haley, being the helpful and trusting girl she was, walked over to the truck. It was the kind of thing kids were taught to do when someone needed help. It seemed harmless, but it wasn't. In one sudden, terrifying moment, the man reached out and grabbed her. Before she could scream or run, he yanked her into the truck. The door slammed. The tires squealed. And just like that, she was gone. No one expected something like this to happen, especially not in broad daylight. But two people did see it. Carlos and Michelle Edwards were in their garage nearby when the abduction took place. At first, it looked like a conversation on the street, but in a split second, they realized what was really happening. Michelle's instincts kicked in immediately. She focused on the truck, burned the license plate number into her mind, and repeated it to herself as the vehicle sped away. Carlos jumped into his own car and tried to chase the truck, but it was already out of sight, turning down a side street and disappearing. Michelle ran inside and dialed 911. Her voice was shaking, but her message was clear. She gave the make and model of the truck, the color, the direction it had gone. Most importantly, she gave the full license plate number, something most people might miss in the chaos of the moment. But she didn't. Her quick thinking triggered an urgent police response. Within minutes, patrol cars were scanning neighborhoods. A description of the truck went out to every unit. Officers were searching, racing against time, knowing that every second mattered. Behind the scenes, dispatchers contacted state patrol and federal authorities. The FBI was alerted. Roads were watched, checkpoints set up. But deep down, many feared the worst. Because when a child is snatched in plain sight and no one knows where they were taken, the clock starts ticking. And time was already running out. If you're watching this, take a moment to reflect. How quickly would you act if you saw something wrong? One call made by a neighbor gave police a chance. Be alert. Be aware. Trust your instincts. Now let's continue with the story. Officers from the Springfield Police Department moved quickly. Within minutes of receiving the 911 call, they issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, for a gold Ford Ranger pickup truck with the license plate that had been memorized by eyewitness Michelle Edwards. The description was relayed across local law enforcement agencies and soon reached the Missouri State Highway Patrol. Realizing the urgency and horrifying potential of the situation, authorities also brought in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Time was critical. A child had been taken in broad daylight, and every second mattered. Using the license plate number, investigators quickly ran the vehicle through the Department of Motor Vehicles database. The registration returned to a couple named Jim and Regina Wood, longtime residents of Springfield. They lived on East Stanford Street, just a few miles from the location where Haley had been abducted. Their son, Craig Michael Wood, was known to have regular access to the truck. In fact, neighbors often saw him driving it. What police found next would send a chill through everyone involved. Craig Michael Wood was not a stranger to the Springfield community. Born in 1968, he had lived in the area his entire life. For many years, he worked for the Springfield Public School District as a paraprofessional, a position that placed him directly in contact with students. His role involved assisting teachers in classrooms, providing support for children with behavioral and academic challenges, and supervising students in both academic and athletic settings. He had also coached football and track at Pleasant View Middle School and Ash Grove High School, working with children of various ages. Parents had trusted him. Students had known him. And during all that time, he had passed every background check required for employment. There were no complaints, no disciplinary actions, no visible red flags. To those on the outside, Craig Wood was just another quiet man doing his job. But by 2014, things had begun to change. Craig Wood had left his position with the school district under unclear circumstances. He had become increasingly withdrawn, spending most of his time alone in the basement of his parents' house. Although he was in his mid-40s, he had never married, had no children of his own, and appeared to lead a solitary life. His parents, Jim and Regina, were well respected. Jim Wood was a theology teacher at Springfield Catholic High School. Known in the community for his calm demeanor and strong moral values, neighbors spoke highly of the couple and had no reason to be concerned about their son. To those who lived nearby, Craig was simply quiet. He wasn't known to cause trouble. He didn't socialize much. He kept to himself. A few described him as awkward or unusual, but no one ever imagined he posed a threat. He played bluegrass music. He worked odd jobs. He stayed mostly out of sight. What no one realized was that Craig Wood had been living a hidden life, one that would only come to light after it was far too late. Inside his basement, behind closed doors, he had built a world of secrecy. A place where no one else went. A space where he kept his thoughts, his writings, his devices, and where, on February 18, 2014, he would carry out an unthinkable act. The gold Ford Ranger that police traced to the Wood household would become the link that unraveled everything. As officers approached the home on East Stanford Street that evening, the tension was high. The truck was parked outside, just as described. Craig Michael Wood was home. He answered the door calmly, but officers immediately noticed something disturbing: the sharp, unmistakable smell of bleach. It was on his clothes. It was in the air. It was inside the truck. That scent alone told investigators they had arrived just in time, or perhaps, tragically, too late. Wood was taken into custody without incident, but what lay beneath the surface of his calm appearance, and what officers would soon uncover inside that house, would shake Springfield to its core. Police secured a search warrant and entered the Wood residence late that evening. What they found in the basement would haunt even the most experienced officers for years to come. It was quiet, too quiet. The air was thick with the overpowering smell of chemicals. The floor was wet, as though someone had tried to scrub it clean in a rush. Bottles of bleach, drain cleaner, and other strong cleaning agents were scattered around, some half empty, others uncapped. Nearby trash bins were overflowing with used paper towels, many of them soaked with blood and chemicals, as if someone had been desperately trying to erase evidence that couldn't be washed away. The walls of the basement were lined with shelves and tools, like any ordinary workspace, but something felt wrong, too deliberate, too sanitized. Investigators moved cautiously, documenting every corner. Then they spotted it, a large plastic storage tote pushed up against a wall. It looked ordinary at first glance, but something about the way it was sealed caught their attention. When they opened the container, the room fell into silence. Inside, wrapped in trash bags and layers of cloth, was the lifeless body of Haley Owens. She had been hidden away in a place no child should ever end up, in the basement of a man who once worked in schools, who once coached children, who had once been trusted. What followed was a grim but necessary autopsy. The medical examiner confirmed the investigators' worst fears. Haley had been sexually assaulted. There were deep ligature marks on her wrists, indicating she had been tightly bound. The cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Quick, cold, and deliberate. The conclusion was devastating. Her life had been taken within minutes of the abduction. She never stood a chance. As detectives continued combing through the evidence, the horror deepened. Surveillance footage emerged from a local Walmart, taken less than 2 hours after Haley vanished. The video showed Craig Wood calmly walking the aisles, picking up bottles of bleach, duct tape, and cleaning supplies. He looked unbothered, methodical. He paid in cash. Later, another video showed him pulling up to a commercial dumpster and tossing in a bag. Inside that dumpster, investigators later recovered clothing confirmed to be Haley's, torn, stained, and discarded like trash. But what truly revealed the mind behind the crime wasn't just the physical evidence. Inside Wood's home, detectives uncovered a chilling collection of handwritten stories. These were not fiction in the innocent sense. They described the kidnapping, abuse, and murder of young lads, fantasies written out in disturbing detail. And it didn't stop there. His computer and digital storage devices were filled with abuse material. Search histories included terms related to abduction, bondage, and abuse. These weren't accidents. They showed a clear, long-standing pattern of obsession and planning, the kind of material that suggested he had been thinking about this for a long time, possibly years. Yet Craig Wood had passed background checks. He had worked in schools, coached track and football. He had stood beside teachers, supervised students, and lived among families in the same city that now mourned a girl he took. By the next morning, Springfield was drowning in grief. The entire community had followed the breaking news throughout the night, praying for a miracle. But there was no miracle, only heartbreak. Word spread quickly. Haley was gone. Her school, Westport Elementary, called in grief counselors and trauma teams to help the staff and students. Her classroom sat painfully quiet. Desks were rearranged, but her empty seat was a wound no one could ignore. Children wrote notes in crayon. They drew flowers, hearts, and messages like, "We miss you, Haley," and "Fly high, angel." Teachers wept in the halls. Parents held their kids tighter. There was no explaining something like this, not to children, not even to adults. Across the city, a quiet movement began. Residents tied pink and purple ribbons, Haley's favorite colors, to trees, fences, front porches, and lampposts. Streets that once felt normal now became a sea of color and mourning. It wasn't just an act of remembrance, it was a statement. That this child mattered, that she would not be forgotten. That same evening, the community came together for a candlelight vigil. Thousands gathered in the cold. People who had never met Haley stood shoulder to shoulder, holding candles, holding hands, and holding back tears. Prayers were said, songs were sung, and silence fell over the crowd like a blanket of shared sorrow. Haley Owens was gone. Despite the swift action by neighbors and police, the crime had occurred and been covered up in a matter of hours. Everything that could go wrong did, and in the time it took for help to organize, the life of a bright, joyful girl had been stolen forever. Her murder didn't just devastate a family, it shook an entire city, and it exposed a chilling truth. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it hides behind the face of someone who was trusted. Haley's name would soon become a call for justice and reform. But on that February night, all anyone could think about was the tragic, unthinkable loss of a 10-year-old girl who had done nothing wrong. The arrest of Craig Michael Wood on the evening of February 18, 2014, was only the beginning of a long, agonizing legal road for the family of Haley Owens. But although the arrest was quick, justice moved slowly. The case became one of the most widely known and emotionally charged criminal cases in Missouri's history. Haley's name had become a symbol of grief and outrage throughout the state. Her story had touched thousands. As a result, finding 12 unbiased jurors, people who had not already formed a strong opinion, proved to be an enormous challenge. Jury selection stretched on for months. Every potential juror was asked whether they had heard about the case, and almost all of them had. Many were parents themselves. Others lived just blocks from where Haley had been taken. Some had placed ribbons on trees or attended vigils. Their emotional responses were too strong for them to serve impartially. In the end, jurors had to be pulled from outside Greene County, and it wasn't until late 2017, over 3 years after Haley's murder, that the trial could finally begin. Inside the courtroom, the mood was heavy and tense. Haley's family sat quietly in the gallery. Her mother, Stacy Barfield, surrounded by loved ones, listening as prosecutors carefully described every painful detail. The courtroom became a place of both legal argument and deep emotional pain. For Haley's family, each day was a reminder of what they had lost. They were forced to hear about their daughter's final moments, the actions taken against her, and the chilling aftermath. It was almost unbearable. The prosecution opened with a methodical, powerful timeline. They showed surveillance footage from a local Walmart taken just after the abduction. There, Craig Wood could be seen walking through the aisles, calm, emotionless, picking up bleach, drain cleaner, duct tape, and trash bags. The timestamp on the receipt placed him at the store within hours of Haley's disappearance. This was not the behavior of a panicked man. It was calculated. When police searched Wood's basement, they found evidence that supported the state's case. But perhaps even more disturbing was what they found in his personal belongings. Despite this overwhelming evidence, Craig Wood's defense team did not claim he was innocent. From the very beginning, they admitted that Wood had abducted, assaulted, and killed Haley Owens. Their strategy was not to win a not guilty verdict, but to save his life. Their goal was to convince the jury to sentence him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, instead of execution. To support this, the defense argued that Wood had been under the influence of methamphetamine at the time of the crime. They claimed he was not in his right mind and that the drugs had impaired his ability to think clearly or control his actions. According to the defense, the murder was not planned in advance. It was a sudden, impulsive breakdown, a mental collapse made worse by long-standing psychological problems and drug use. They brought in a forensic psychologist to testify. This expert explained that Craig had suffered from mental health issues for much of his life. He had shown signs of social isolation, obsessive thoughts, and emotional detachment. The psychologist said Wood was not a cold-hearted killer, but a troubled, mentally unstable man who had lost control in a terrible moment. In a deeply emotional moment, the defense also called Craig Wood's father, Jim Wood, to the stand. Jim was a respected theology teacher at Springfield Catholic High School. He spoke through tears, pleading with the court not to sentence his son to death. He said taking another life will not bring Haley back. He acknowledged the pain his son had caused and offered no excuses, but he asked for mercy. Still, prosecutors strongly rejected the idea that this was a crime of sudden impulse. They pointed to the evidence of planning, the bleach, the duct tape, the efforts to clean and conceal the body. They reminded the jury that Haley had been killed within minutes of being taken. They argued that the writings, the videos, the dark fantasies, all proved that Wood had long harbored these violent urges. This wasn't a snap decision. This was a predator acting on desires he had prepared for. In the end, the trial became a battle not over guilt, but over punishment, life behind bars, or fight. Although Craig Wood's defense highlighted his lack of violent history, court records show that he did have a prior criminal background. In 1990, he pleaded guilty to possession of a controlled substance and was fined $100. Then, in 2001, he was convicted of a misdemeanor for stealing wildlife. While these offenses were nonviolent and occurred years before Haley's murder, they were part of his official criminal record. Outside of his legal troubles, friends described Wood as a quiet, solitary man. He had never married, had no children, and was known in local circles as an amateur bluegrass musician. He played instruments like the banjo and was often involved in small music events around Springfield. Despite his reserved lifestyle, those who knew him never imagined he was capable of this horrific crime. After a short deliberation, less than 2 hours, the jury returned its verdict, guilty on all counts. In the end, 10 of the 12 jurors voted in favor of the death penalty. But Missouri law requires a unanimous decision to impose it. The 2 dissenting jurors voted for life in prison without the possibility of parole. With the jury deadlocked, the decision fell to Judge Thomas Mountjoy. On January 11, 2018, Judge Mountjoy sentenced Craig Michael Wood to death by lethal injection. Inside the courtroom, the Owens family remained composed, but visibly emotional. For them, it wasn't about vengeance, it was about accountability. Their daughter's killer would never again walk free. It was, at last, justice delivered. Wood was transferred to Potosi Correctional Center, Missouri's maximum security facility that houses death row inmates. In the months that followed, his legal team filed appeals, challenging the constitutionality of a judge-imposed death sentence following a jury impasse. They argued the procedure violated his Sixth Amendment rights. But in April 2020, the Missouri Supreme Court upheld both the conviction and the sentence, affirming that the sentencing procedure was consistent with Missouri law and constitutional standards. Wood's attorneys then petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court, hoping the nation's highest court would take up the case. In January 2021, the court declined to hear the appeal, leaving the death sentence intact. While the legal process moved through the courts, Haley's name became a rallying cry for change. One of the greatest public frustrations after Haley's murder was the delay in issuing an Amber Alert. Despite eyewitnesses reporting the abduction immediately and providing a full license plate, there was no system in place to let local police issue the alert without going through multiple levels of state approval. In response, Haley's Law was introduced. It aimed to streamline the Amber Alert process, giving law enforcement on the ground the authority to act quickly, within minutes, not hours. In a powerful show of unity, Haley's mother and Craig Wood's father testified together in support of the law. Jim Wood, still devastated by the actions of his son, told lawmakers that if a faster system could prevent even one future tragedy, it would be worth it. Haley's story is not just a tragedy. It's a reminder to stay alert, stay united, and protect every child.